everybody, it's Amanda, and we are going on to our next chapter of Matthew chapter 2, for our Bible study on the life of Christ. Again, we're going through the four Gospels this year in 2020, and I hope we'll really get to know Christ in his life and just feel more confident in knowing the Word of God. So anyway, we're today in Matthew chapter 2, and I'm going to read it first, and then we'll talk about it. So let's read. Now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and are come to worship him. When Herod the king had heard these things, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people together, he demanded of them where Christ should be born. And they said unto him, In Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet. And thou, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are not the least among the princes of Judah, for out of thee shall come a governor, that shall rule my people Israel. Then Herod, when he had privily called the wise men, inquired of them diligently what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, and said, Go and search diligently for the young child, and when ye have found him, bring me word again, that I may come and worship him also. When they had heard the king, they departed, and lo, the star which they saw in the east went before them, till it came and stood over where the young child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. And when they were come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented unto him gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And being warned of God in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed into their own country another way. And when they were departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, Arise, and take the young child and his mother, and flee into Egypt, and be thou there until I bring thee word, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. When he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night, and departed into Egypt, and was there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken of the Lord by the prophet, saying, Out of Egypt have I called my son. Then Herod, when he saw that he was mocked of the wise men, was exceeding wroth, and sent forth and slew all the children that were in Bethlehem, and in all the coast thereof, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had diligently inquired of the wise men. Then was fulfilled that which was spoken by Jeremy the prophet, saying, In Ramah was there a voice heard, lamentation and weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, and would not be comforted, because they are not. But when Herod was dead, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying, Arise, and take the young child and his mother, and go into the land of Israel, for they are dead which sought the young child's life. And he arose and took the young child and his mother, and came into the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus did reign in Judea in the room of his father, Herod, he was afraid to go thither, notwithstanding being warned of God in a dream, he turned aside into the parts of Galilee. And he came and dwelt in a city called Nazareth, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophets, He shall be called a Nazarene. So, we've finished chapter 2. There's a lot to be said of that. A couple of things I want to notice here is that if you remember back to chapter 1, which if you haven't watched chapter 1, I'll link it at the top. One of the things that we talked about in chapter 1 was the book Matthew was written by Matthew, they believe. He was also called Levi, and he was a tax collector. And he actually was trying to use this book to show the Jewish people, the Hebrews, that this was the Christ that had been prophesied. So you can again see in this chapter that there are some evidences he's trying to point out. You know, when he says, so this happened that it would be fulfilled what was spoken by the prophet Jeremy, or this happened so that it would be what was spoken by the prophets that be called a Nazarene. So you can see how, again, he's trying to use the tales of what had happened in the life of Christ to show how it matches up exactly with the prophecy that true believers would know. Now, I do want to point out, too, speaking of true believers, that this whole idea Herod was the king in Jerusalem, and when the wise men came to him, you can see a few things about him. First of all, he didn't know anything. He didn't know anything about any prophecies. But when the wise men came, they came to the king. But it actually says that it stirred up not just the king, he was troubled, but all of Jerusalem with him. So this wasn't something that they did quietly. This is thing that all of Jerusalem kind of knew what was going on, that these wise men were here and they were looking for this Messiah that had been prophesied. And they were kind of troubled because nobody really knew what was going on. And so they started inquiring and saying, what's going on? So he asked the priests and the scribes, and he said, where is this Christ going to be born at? And they told him in Bethlehem of Judea. And but you can still tell, so you can tell right there just from that, Herod doesn't know anything. He doesn't really believe any of this. If he did, he probably would be studying it himself, but he didn't really believe it. And frankly, even after talking to these people, talking to the wise men, he still didn't believe it. And I'll tell you why I think that's the case. Because notice that he didn't go with them. He's troubled by it, but he didn't go with them. He didn't even send anybody with them. They just went. And he's just like, okay, well, see you later. If you hear anything about that Messiah, let me know. I'd love to go worship him. And of course he doesn't mean it, but again, he doesn't, if he really believed it, especially when you see his reaction when it comes later where he starts, killing children, if he'd really believed it, he would have gone out after it and, tried to make sure that he was taking care of the deed himself, or at least had somebody go with him to make sure it was done immediately. But it wasn't until later that after the wise men had gone and they found him, and let's not even, the miraculous story of the star that led them that way, the Lord tells us in the Bible that there's signs in heaven, stars and things in heaven for signs. And so if we pay attention, that we can know things. So simple things from just when to plant your gardens. But here, apparently, a star told the wise men in the east that the Messiah was coming, and they didn't even have the benefit of the Bible. They didn't know what all was going on. They came and inquired of the people of Jerusalem, and they didn't even really get many answers from them. So it's just really neat there that happened. But anyway, so the wise men go and find the Lord. They find the baby, and even then, they realize, because the Lord had warned them, we're not going to go tell him. He doesn't have good intentions up his sleeve. And so it's not till later when Herod finds out that they've gone and that they actually met with someone, so it's something happened, that he actually says, you know what, kill all the kids, 2 years and younger. And again, I think that shows that he doesn't really believe it. Like, he just halfway does. He's like, okay, well, just in case it's true, we're going to do this. But again, I feel like if he really believed it, he would have diligently inquired as to where the wise men had been. You would think wise men from the east, people would know where they went. People would have seen them traveling. There would have been eyes that would have noticed. And if he had really been inclined to, he could have sought them out and actually found out where they actually had gone. But instead of even bothering to do that, he just said, you know what, just kill those kids and we'll be good. And he thinks that's enough. And it's not. It's absolutely not. And I do recognize that is the Lord's hand of protection on Christ. But at the same time, I'm just saying that you can tell from all of this that Herod does not have a heart of someone who believed God's word. And so that's relevant, I think, because when you think about our own lives, sometimes people claim to be Christians, and what they do what they say with their mouth about being a Christian and how they behave with their actions, two different things. It's this whole idea that, do you really believe what the Lord said, or do you don't? Does it reflect on your actions or not? For instance, this whole idea of he wanted to take care of this whole situation with this foretold person, and he, rather than just actually go and make sure he understood and make sure it was taken care of, he just said, I'll do this and this will be enough and I'm covered. I think that's kind of like some people who think, think when it comes to being a Christian, like, you know what, I'm really not sure about it, but I'm going to pray and that'll cover me. If it's really true, then God, I'm with you. But that's not the heart of someone who genuinely believes. And I think this is really important, because when the Bible talks about salvation, it's confess with thy mouth, but it's also believe in thine heart. Two things. Two very important things when it comes to your faith in the Lord and whether or not you're a Christian. Just a thought there. Herod did not really believe. I also want to point out too, because remember chapter 1 talked a lot about Joseph, and chapter 2 continues on with the story of Joseph, this whole idea that the Lord continued to address him in dreams. And Joseph was in fact leading the family. The Lord came to him and said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go this direction. I want you to go to Egypt because Herod's coming after you. And then I want you to go back. And Joseph was obedient. However, it does say that he was warned of God, but he was still afraid. He was still afraid, even though he had clear instruction from the Lord. And Joseph, as we learned in chapter 1, he was a man that loved the Lord, and he was trying to make good choices, and he was trying to do right. But that didn't take away that fear when he was in a difficult situation. So sometimes I think that we feel that if the Lord spoke to us directly and we knew it was the Lord, that we would be fearless, that we would just handle things because we know the Lord was in it. But here you have Joseph, who felt confidently that he was following the directions of the Lord, and yet he was still, taking a pause there. This whole idea that he was afraid. So if you have fear, if you know something is of the Lord and you have fear, that's natural. But we need to just put that aside and follow him, because he has our best interest at heart. The Lord, it might have been a scary situation that he was sending Joseph and Mary to, but he had a plan and it was going to be fulfilled. And they were safe. They were 1,000% safe. There was nothing that was going to interrupt the Lord's plan there. So even if it was scary, they just had to trust him. The Lord had such a big overarching plan that they had no concept of what it was going to be at that time. And frankly, there's no way they could have known, because they would have never grasped it, understood it, or it just would have been too much for them. And think of how the Lord can be doing that in your life. There's scary things that sometimes he's asking you to do, and you don't grasp how great it is. I think I'm just thinking about that in my own life right now. Like, there's so many things that I am just like intimidated by, but the Lord has a great plan, and I don't even know what it is, but he's going to do amazing and mighty things with it. And it's just a matter of not being afraid and just walking in his will. So anyway, this is all part of the story of Christ that we're going through. And as we go through it, I think we're going to see a lot of things that we can learn from ourselves. But I don't want to miss the actual, the piece of Christ that we're getting out of this. So when we have the first chapter, it was kind of the things that came before Christ. But in this chapter, it's our first actual kind of vision of Christ himself, because that's when they came in the house and they saw a young child with Mary, his mother. So that's our first little picture of him, and that he was given gifts. And there he is as a child. And don't forget that, because it's an important part of the story, that he was born of this virgin, and he was a child. He had to grow. And so here we are, we see him. We're going to watch him grow up and be who he was intended to be. So, all right, that's it for chapter 2. I hope you guys will come back and follow us as we go through our Bible study. I'm really glad that you're here, and I'm looking forward to the next chapter. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next time. Bye.